Good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. We are going to talk tropics here with more potential systems forming in the Gulf of Mexico as the waters heat up, but also the atmosphere gets more favorable for that. And also, we're going to look at some severe weather in the Northeast today into tonight, and then another round of severe weather in the plains to follow that. So, thank you for joining me this morning. I hope you all have had a great week so far. Right now, nothing forming in the Gulf, but the gyre is going to shift north. The gyre is a larger circulation that forms this time of the year near Central America, and conditions should start to finally get more favorable for moisture to make its way northward. We are seeing on the models a pretty decent chance of something forming in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico for the first half of next week. After that, a little bit more uncertain, but models are indicating another piece tries to enter some of the same areas here towards next weekend. And too soon to say right now if we've got a threat for anything to form or form quickly, but certainly it is going to be turning wetter for those of us here in Texas, northeastern Mexico, Louisiana. At the same time, Florida has just been getting relentless amounts of rain. That finally looks like it's going to taper down some as we head into the weekend with more typical weather after that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's on the map now and then what could form. There is a system, AL90, that is still out there moving away from land, coming close to the Outer Banks tonight, which has a small window where it could still scoop up a depression or even tropical storm status. Not a great chance, but something we'll watch, but fortunately not really a problem anymore. The biggest problems have been the rain it's brought to Florida. This next area has got a 40% chance of developing here towards Monday and Tuesday. It may actually come over from Belize and Yucatan and then have a chance to form once it makes it into the Bay of Campeche. That very well is probably going to be our first named storm, but again, really tough to say because this one still has a small window to do that. The first name on the list is Alberto. On the Pacific side, we are going to see a circulation forming here south of Acapulco, which I think you all remember got hit very hard by a Category 5 hurricane last year. This system does not have that potential. It's probably more of a rainmaker for southern Mexico. Again, not a terrible thing. This area is in a pretty significant drought. It's been an extremely hot spring. But is likely going to drift and kind of fall into the circulation of the gyre here. Here's a look at our tropics right now, and I'll circle a couple of things for you guys to follow. Cold front dropping down here into the northeast and into the Ohio Valley. Large trough, which is extending from our gyre here over Central America, right on up through South Florida, up to this low pressure system here off of the southeast coast. Then you see kind of sinking air here and a bit of a trough digging down in the Caribbean, promoting hostile conditions for any sort of development in the Caribbean. So right now we're quiet there. And then we do have some waves coming off of Africa, but just nothing that is got a real chance of developing into anything tropically. So some good news for the time being, but you know, it is early July or early to mid-June here. It's going to be until about July before things get too favorable for that. The northern Gulf is quiet right now. Northern and central Florida, relatively quiet. All of our action right now extends along the base of this trough in an area that is cooking here for tropical development over the next couple of weeks. Here's a look at the Caribbean. Same deal. You can kind of see our circulation here. Let me see if I can change this color to pink so you guys can see. But high pressure aloft right now is allowing this area, this gyre, to form in here. You kind of see this upper level circulation aloft. What'll happen is as wind shear begins to weaken over the weekend, even though this is over the main land here, we're going to see multiple circulations forming. The first one kind of in here, that's going to kind of go in this direction. Second one's going to form up in here. That's going to go in this direction. It has our best chance of developing. And then models show a third one somewhere in here later next week may try to follow in the footsteps of the first one. So that's what I'll be tracking for you guys. Right now, nothing definite. So that's what makes this such a challenge. But over time, I do think we are going to see that change. And finally here, AL90, still something to keep an eye on. It is actually going to be over its most favorable waters to form by tonight. The low-level center is down in here. Thunderstorm activity is off to the east of it. Lots of wind shear with it. But as it moves into this direction in here, even though waters cool down some, it's actually going to be in a little bit better chance to form. So keep an eye on this. It may look completely different tomorrow morning, but that's about the only chance we've got for it to form. Central Atlantic looking great. You see westerlies aloft that are going up and over the lower level easterlies. You can kind of see here's the easterlies down in here. This is down at the surface. Aloft, you see these higher clouds coming up and over. That's going to keep anything from forming. Do have a trough up in here, a bit of a circulation in here, but again, the waters are a little cool. and we're just not to that point yet where anything could form. That may change a little bit as we get into July and August. And then eastern portions of the Atlantic and the African coast right now looking pretty good. We are going to see waves coming across and then hitting that wind shear and drier air. Finally, on the Pacific side of things, again, we're just watching the gyre for this time. Here you can see off of the Carolina coast, AL90 Invest. And Invest is just an area that models get run on to see if there's any potential tropical development. And right now, it still doesn't look super exciting. The wave or the low pressure came off of Africa. Now it's kind of moving up into this area. And you can kind of see a broad circulation, but nothing tightening up. Interestingly, the Gulf Stream is firing up more storms here. Fortunately, they are over open waters. And just not a very great setup for development, but one that we still could potentially see development from. Generally speaking, models take it off to the east and east-northeast. The GFS brings a piece back, but the GFS has some trouble, as we learned last year with Idalia, tried to do the same thing. So generally speaking, it's going to move out and come by south of Newfoundland, and all the rain stays over the water. Intensity forecast, there's a small chance it tries to develop close to tropical storm strength. If that happens, it's in about 36 hours. So we're looking at later tomorrow night, maybe first thing on Sunday, but well over the water at that point. Ship's model says maybe that's a possibility as well here north of Bermuda. Most of the models are north of this, by the way. The Ships is a little closer to Bermuda, but not a big deal for Bermuda. And then here's the European ensemble, which shows there is a small chance, that about a 10% chance, maybe 20% chance we have a tropical storm in here Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. But as we get to Sunday, that chance already fades into the sunset. So I'm not going to spend much more time talking about it. We'll take a look tomorrow morning. That's about it. Gulf of Mexico, though, that's the area to keep an eye on. Right now, no real chance for anything to form until we get to about Sunday night or Monday morning. Then we start to see something that may pop up over water here, a chance for a depression to form, and you can see our chances start to grow as we get to Tuesday and Wednesday over the Bay of Campeche, and then that system heads west into Mexico on Thursday. And then chances look like they're going to try to recycle here as we get towards the second part of next weekend. So we've got 7 or 8 days before the one to watch, if you want to call it that. We have to watch the first one too, but the second one may have a little bit better opportunity here to do something. This is the Canadian model. This shows you precipitable water. That's moisture in the atmosphere. It also shows wind direction here. And you can see this area of darker colors indicates moist conditions over South Florida. That's been with us all week. You can kind of see that here, this feed into South Florida. Now, the good news is that the winds are going to shift around in Florida here and promote some drying aloft. So that is, let me get my cursor to move out. You can kind of see here, this is tomorrow, and there's still a bit of a band in South Florida. We may still be wet, but then the flow begins to come out of the north and northeast, which will push that moisture back into the Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, things are loading up here near Central America, near the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize, Guatemala. And the Canadian shows a weak circulation actually forms on the Caribbean side here Sunday night, and then has a better chance of forming here as we get into Monday night and Tuesday, but it is aimed to the west. We've got this area of brighter colors indicating high pressure aloft, which is going to keep this off to the south. It's going to drive it west towards Mexico. And the time frame for that landfall looks like it'll be sometime Wednesday or early on Thursday. Now, behind it, there's another piece that comes through. All the models have been showing that, by the way, now, although there are obvious differences. And you can see moisture starts to increase again. South Florida will start getting wetter again on this southeasterly flow. The high pressure zone shifts northward. That allows moisture to return. Western Cuba, the Bahamas also have a chance of being pretty wet, Cayman Islands. But most of this moisture is going to be aimed more to the western half of the Gulf of Mexico and even the central Gulf Coast, including Louisiana. So the Canadian says a weaker system may try to take aim at South Texas here in about 8 or 9 days. European model looks a little bit different, as you would imagine, but it's got low pressure forming here in the southwestern Gulf on Tuesday, and then taking aim at northeastern Mexico, not too far from the Mexican-Texas border, by Thursday morning as a tropical storm. Behind it, it does not really have anything too concentrated, but it does show lowering pressures again, but not as defined as the GFS or the Canadian. Here's the GFS model, and you can see low pressure moving into the western Gulf, taking aim here, maybe near, I think, Tampico, Mexico, Wednesday evening. And then that moves out, and it is probably too aggressive with the next piece that comes across here, but is showing a storm in the western Gulf as well. by the time we get to the end of next weekend. And the GFS is doing some GFS things here that I do not trust, and I don't think too many people in the weather world trust. But the moral of the story is that wetter times are ahead for Texas, for the Gulf Coast, all the way over into Western Florida. We are going to turn wet again in South Florida, but we've got somewhat of a reprieve coming here for the first half of next week. So the gates are open here for development, and don't get too caught up in what you see in the longer range of the GFS. There's a newer model run, by the way, that's come in, but I don't think it goes out that far as of this taping. But you can see showing the same thing, weakish system moving into Western Mexico or into Eastern Mexico here by Wednesday night, early Thursday. Second piece of energy tries to come up here, and that will probably be in the Western Gulf later next weekend. We still have heavy rainfall to deal with this morning in Florida. It is pushing south somewhat, but we are still anywhere basically south of Cape Coral and West Palm Beach has a threat for very heavy rain. You can see, I know this is tough to read, but 2 to 3 inch rain rates are still possible here this morning. And you can see rainfall totals from the HER model indicating that some places here in the next couple of days will likely see between 2 and 4 inches of rain on top of what we've already have. And the Keys may get very wet. The HER is showing in the Keys the potential for up to 8 inches of rain, parts of Miami-Dade up to 6 inches. Cape Coral, parts of Lee County may see another 3 to 6 inches of rain, according to that model. The NAM model is showing similar things here. Southwest Florida, some convergence. Deep southern parts of Florida, Miami-Dade, eastern Broward County, same areas have been getting hit. But more rain coming for the Florida Keys. And guess who's not going to see much rain? Northern Florida will continue to be pretty hot with temperatures approaching 100 here. The RRFS model really goes to town here in Cape Coral, 6, 7 inches of rain. Fort Myers, maybe 7 inches. Miami, a couple of inches. We just don't need to see any more rain, but unfortunately, that's the case. Here's our hazards map. We'll talk about severe weather and some other interesting things going on. Flood watch for South Florida, heat advisories and warnings over the Southwest and parts of the interior West. And this blue indicates a winter storm watch for Western Montana. I'm going to show you that in just a second. But first, let's talk about the threat for severe weather. We can see our front is arcing through this area. There's a trough here in Ontario that's going to bring a faster wind flow into the Northeast today. As a result, we've got a threat for some severe weather across the Northeast today, maybe some intense wind coming with that. Here's our tropical feed coming up the East Coast here. That is going to push away. And then we've got another system in the Four Corners region in Nevada that is going to activate and bring some severe weather into the upper Midwest as we get through the weekend and into the start of next week as well. Here's our wind flow. Whoops. I love this. I love this. Here's our trough moving into the Northeast today. Active weather expected. You can see it's kind of pushing southeast. Should be out by late tonight. Next system moves into the plains here over the weekend. And then big trough in the west brings much cooler weather into the northwestern U.S. and into western Canada. And that will lead to a couple ripples here that will likely lead to more severe weather in places you would expect to see them this time of the year. Take a look at the east, though. We've got what's called a death ridge, a big heat dome set to build in here later this week or later this weekend into next week. And these are what are called heights of the 500 millibar level. And we are seeing these heights getting up all the way to about 600 decameters, 6,000 meters, which is close to 20,000 feet up where this 500 millibar level is found. And that is higher than you would expect and about as high as we get here in the east. So the heat is going to be on here the second half of next week, especially as that builds in. It's going to keep things pretty stable and it's going to push everything off to the north and west. So we're going to talk more about that next week. Slight risk today over central PA, over northern Maryland, extending all the way up into southwestern Maine. Marginal risk surrounds that. For the mid-Ohio Valley, Western Virginia, all the way up into southeastern Canada, New Brunswick. Mostly a wind threat at this point, but we could also see some hail with these storms this afternoon. And then in the plains, we also have a threat for severe weather, including the Denver, Colorado Springs, I-15 corridor, and maybe severe weather all the way up into Montana as we head into this afternoon. Tornado threat mainly on the high plains. Big wind threat, though, across this entire region, and some hail possible as well. Tomorrow, that area shifts towards Omaha. Day 2 of the College World Series might get interesting here, unfortunately. Minneapolis could have severe weather. We're all the way down to the Texas Panhandle. And then we're going to see it up in the northern plains into the Canadian prairies. Chance for tornadoes in Omaha tomorrow and tomorrow night, wind threat as well, and a chance for hail across this area. Less of a severe outbreak, but still a chance here as we get to Sunday over the upper Midwest, all the way into Wisconsin and upper Michigan. Monday, the same area that got hit 2 days ago here in Minnesota is under the gun once again. Let's take a look at the Northeast real quick. I'm going to wrap things up quicker today because I've got to get moving, but you'll see storms are going to activate in Maine first, early this afternoon, and then across the rest of the Northeast by mid-afternoon from Ohio and PA right up into southern Maine, and then moving through the I-95 corridor this evening between 7 and 10 o'clock. There'll be some heavy rain potential, and there'll be some severe weather, and I expect we'll see a couple of severe thunderstorm watches as we get through the afternoon and evening hours. Here's a look at Maine first. Could be an intense line of storms, strong winds with these expected, maybe some hail as well. Hitting the I-95 corridor later in the afternoon between 3 and 6 o'clock, and then moving away, and then that's that. Heavy rain may still impact parts of New Brunswick, which I know is kind of cut off here. Here's a look farther down the I-95 corridor, and we'll see storms activating pretty quickly by mid-afternoon south and east of the New York State Thruway and extending across much of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and the Hudson Valley of New York. New York City area, 7, 8 o'clock, likely to get hit. Long Island, things are going to weaken due to that more stable water, but we may still have some strong wind, and then still some heavy rain overnight, but for the most part, that severe weather threat comes to an end. Pennsylvania could also see some severe weather this afternoon, and definitely look at central PA, Williamsport, State College, Altoona, DuBois, Clearfield, all the way up into the Poconos, Scranton area, mid-afternoon, and then things are going to move away pretty quickly by this evening. Down across Maryland, we are probably not really getting hit until we get to tonight. Keep an eye on things coming down the I-70 corridor. That's where things love to light up, as we saw last week. Probably not a tornado threat this time, but certainly a strong wind threat, and then some heavy rain overnight tonight. Falling apart by the time it hits Delaware, by the way. And then across Ohio, West Virginia, western PA, we may have some showers and storms this afternoon, but a better chance will be around dinner time over the I-70 corridor, and then moving down towards Parkersburg and even Charleston by the time we get to about 8, 9, 10 o'clock tonight before things clear out in time for the weekend. Finally, the upper Midwest will be pretty busy. You'll see storms popping up here this afternoon, kind of a circulation here over South Dakota here overnight tonight. More storms expected tomorrow. You're going to see that towards the evening hours, including Omaha. Looks like 8, 9 o'clock local time. Big storms in Montana, North Dakota, and southeastern Saskatchewan here tomorrow night, and it will stay busy across this area. In the west, big trough crashes into the area. We are going to see higher elevation snow tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night over the Cascades and also over the mountains of Montana, kind of two different waves moving through. And we may have some significant snow in the higher elevations by Tuesday morning across Montana. You'll see some snow totals here, and don't get too carried away with this because it's all going to be in the mountains, but potentially over a foot of snow, maybe 2 feet over the very highest peaks here of western Montana. We'll see some snow in Oregon and Idaho as well. Again, a lot of it's elevation dependent, but if you have vacation plans to Yellowstone, there is a chance for a few inches of snow here, which probably isn't going to stick around for too long. And finally, let's look at the heat. It is going to build into the eastern United States by Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. While it'll be much colder across the Northwest and Western Canada, but that cold gets wiped out, and we see heating resuming in the Western U.S. later next week. Triple-digit heat expected for portions of the Midwest and Northeast, especially Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. It'll start out not too humid, but that humidity does climb, and I'm going to have more detail for you here next week in those videos. The other issue will be the rain on the Gulf Coast. Look at how wet Texas is going to get, Mexico very wet, and eventually we're going to see a return of some heavy rain to parts of Florida as well. The interior of the South and the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest, though, are going to be pretty dry here through next weekend. It'll be hot, and we'll see active weather over the northern tier of the country. Here are some rain potentials for the Gulf. Florida's already getting its rain now, but we're going to see more into the weekend. But take a look at Texas and Louisiana, 3 to 6 inches, but potentially a foot or more on the coastal bend of Texas, depending on if we get something tropical to form down in here. So we got to run, but I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. If you have not become a subscriber yet, I urge you to do so. I thank you for your time today. I wish you many blessings, and as always, I want to thank God and give him all the glory for giving me this opportunity to share my gift with you, and for blessing everybody who comes here today. John tells us in John 16, or Jesus tells us in John 16:33, that these things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Jesus says there's going to be tough times, tribulations, trials, difficulty in the world, chaos. But the Lord has spoken to us in that we who believe in him should have peace. And that's why I follow God, because until I did, there was no peace in my life. There was uncertainty. There was lack of self-worth. There was lack of confidence. There was lack of a future eternal life. There was no knowing where I was going to go when my time here is gone. And nobody knows when that's exactly going to be until it's too late. But the Lord has overcome the world and given those of us who have chosen to believe the ability to have joy, to be of good cheer, to be a light in a dark time, and to, at the very end, inherit the kingdom of God. And that is the good news I wanted to share with you today. Please know that I pray for everybody on this channel, but if you do have a specific prayer request, I'd love to pray with you and for you. Hope you guys have a wonderful Friday. See you soon. Take care.